Hey everyone, George here and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about something that I think is really important, and that is how much time do you spend on maintaining your tanks, whether it be that you have 2 tanks or you have 25 tanks, whatever it might be. How do you minimize the amount of time and make it efficient to keep your tanks in top shape? And that is a question I'm asked all the time. So we're going to be talking about tips and tricks today, and I'm going to be actually showing you some of those tips and tricks and giving you some ideas on how you can make this hobby enjoyable and less stressful by staying ahead of it and doing things that I think are going to make your life a lot easier. So stick with me, and we're going to get right back to that in just a second here. So as I said in the intro, one of the most important things that you can be doing to make sure that your tanks are in tip-top shape all the time is regular maintenance. You don't have to be a slave to it, but you have to put in the work, and I'm talking about just a few minutes a day, depending on how many tanks that you have. Now, if you have 10 tanks, for example, my calculation would be that if you are spending 15 to 20 minutes a day on those tanks, you are probably putting in as much time as you need to make sure that those tanks are healthy. Now, this is going to be a 3-part series. This is not something I'm going to cover all in one day because there's just way too many things to cover here. And I think it's important that we give it adequate time for each one of these topics that we're going to be talking about. And I will be talking about in a few minutes here, because I don't want to make this video really long, what categories we will be covering. But the joy of having these tanks and really spending time sitting back and enjoying them rather than becoming a slave to them is really all about the maintenance of the tanks. Now, as you can see, these are pristine tanks. These are tanks that have absolutely no problems with algae. They have no problems with water parameters. They have no problems with the health of the fish. And there's reasons for that. And it's because the amount of time that I put in to these is not overwhelming, but it's sufficient enough to make sure that if you put into place a good system that is very efficient on the health and welfare of your fish and the tanks every single day, you're going to get a lot of joy out of them. Now, like I said, this is going to be a 3-part series. The very first part of this series will be in the coming week, and that will cover 3 different things, and that is number 1, water quality, number 2, fish health, and number 3, feeding schedules. Now, I'm not going to get into all of that today because it would be absolutely impossible for me to cover all of those things adequately today. I have found that unfortunately the attention span of the masses out there who watch these videos is about 15 to 20 minutes tops, and you start to lose people, especially if you go on and on and on and on about a particular subject. I'm a very detailed person, but I want to break this up because I don't want this to be a tedious video or series of videos that bore you to death and make you not want to come back to my channel. So we're going to be talking in just a few minutes about some of the things that we're going to be covering and how we're going to do that and how I can make your life a little bit easier and more enjoyable and enjoying these beautiful fish that we have here. I mean, we put a lot of work into this stuff. We don't want to let it go downhill, and there's so many ways that it can go south very quickly and take the joy out of it for you. If you do the work and have a good maintenance schedule and program, you're going to find that you're really going to enjoy your fish. So let's come back to that in just a second here when we come back and talk about the areas that we're going to cover in the 3-part series that we're about to put together here over the next few weeks. And we'll talk about the very first thing, and that is, like I said, the items that I talked about a few minutes ago, which would be water quality, fish health, and a feeding schedule. So stick with me and we'll come back to that in just a second here. Thanks for joining me here today. So as I said a minute ago, one of the biggest things that causes people to get out of this hobby is letting things get past them that become bigger than they can handle. And the one way to prevent that is to have a good maintenance record and a good maintenance program put together that makes life easy on you. The last thing you want to do is become a slave to this hobby and have so much time spent on maintaining your tanks that you don't get a chance to sit down and enjoy them. After all, the reality of it is the reason why we have these tanks in the first place is because we're trying to enjoy the hobby. How do you enjoy the hobby? You cut down on the time that you're spending maintaining the tanks that you have without compromising. And that is the clue here. Without compromising the quality of the water, the quality of the substrate, the quality of the plants that you have in your tank, and the health of your fish overall. These are the things that are so important that we're going to cover over the next couple of videos in this series that are going to help you to understand what the maintenance of your aquariums means to the long-term health of those aquariums. It's not hard, it really is, and I know it can seem overwhelming for those who are new to this, and I know that it can seem overwhelming to people who have things going on in their lives and don't have a lot of time for this. So the first thing that I would tell you is don't get in over your head and don't get in front of your skis with doing some of the maintenance on this gallery of tanks that you might have, and not getting so many tanks that you cannot handle them. Understanding your capabilities, because we're all different, is so important in understanding what you should be doing as far as a maintenance program. If you're spending 5 or 6 hours a week maintaining, let's say on average maybe a person who's in the hobby has 10 tanks. If you're spending 5 or 6 hours on 10 tanks a week, then you are spending far too much time, and somewhere along the way you have neglected to do the things that keep you from having to do that. Now, if you look at these tanks that are next to me here, you'll see that these tanks are absolutely pristine. They lack algae, they lack any kind of water parameter problems whatsoever. They're not overstocked. They're not in a situation where I have neglected them to the point where they need to be put so much attention into them that I just totally get off my maintenance program with everything that I have. You don't want to do that. And one of the ways that I think is the most important ways to do that is to consistently put the work in a few minutes a day. Let's say a half hour a day, if you had 10 tanks, is more than sufficient to keep all of your tanks in pristine shape. Now, the first thing that we're going to be talking about in the next series as we go through this is the health and quality of the water in your tank and how you can keep it that way. I've gone over this a zillion times, but there's just doesn't seem to be that ability to understand that water quality and the maintenance of your water is the #1 lifeline to keeping a good, healthy tank. And whether you have, like I said, 2 tanks, 10 tanks, 25 tanks, it really doesn't matter. If you're doing the basics and you're doing them consistently, you are not going to become a slave to the hobby and then therefore become angry and frustrated with the hobby to the point where you resent it and you really don't want to do it anymore. A lot of money gets wrapped up into these tanks over time, and good maintenance is going to help you to sit back and actually enjoy the beauty of the tanks and the quality of what you have done and the work that you've put into them to help you to enjoy them. So we're going to be talking about that in the next couple of series. We're going to cover water changes, as I said. We're going to cover fish health. Now this is something that's very big. People don't even know sometimes when fish are missing in their tank. They don't do a health check every day on those fish and make an accurate count of them, especially when you have a tank like this that is so full of live plants. But that's the key. That's one of the keys that we're going to talk about. A well-planted tank, what that does to benefit you. But how do you keep track of the fish in a tank like this and know exactly what's going on with them and the health of those fish? And if there's some missing, have they died? Has something happened to them and you just haven't noticed it? When you get a lot of tanks, that can happen really easily. So there's some tricks that I have for counting your fish and keeping track of those fish and understanding where your fish are at all times. And that's the number one trick that I'm going to show you today that a lot of people do not understand. And I'm going to leave you with that one trick before we get into all these really heavy maintenance issues that people may have questions about. Keeping track of your fish is going to be the number one thing that you're going to want to do as you do a daily health check on your tanks. And it's not hard. I'm going to give you a simple trick. How do you count the fish in your tank? Well, the answer is your cell phone. And you're like, George, what does that mean? How do I keep track of the fish in my tank with my cell phone? What I do is I keep a small series of shots of every single tank by just taking my cell phone out, taking a picture of the tank. As I look at the tank right here, and I look at the fish that are moving around in this tank. You don't want to do this the first hour or two that your lights are on, because not all of your fish are going to be active. You want to do this at a time when your fish become active for the day, and you also are able to count them because they're looking for food. All fish at some point in the day get into the habit of being fed at around the same time, and that's a good important thing too, but we'll get into that more in the next series. One of the things that I do is I go along and I take a series of pictures during the day. It only takes a second to snap a shot and to get an idea of your fish health. In other words, are all my fish alive in this tank? Is somebody missing? Whatever. You know what you have in those tanks by what I do is I keep a little log that is right below each tank in a drawer. It has a little piece of paper that gives you a guideline as to what you have in that tank and what you should be looking for. A simple snapshot with something that we carry with us all the time, which is a video, or not a video, but an iPhone or a Samsung phone, whatever. It doesn't make a difference what the model is. Just taking a picture of that tank can give you a really good idea that your fish are fine and that everybody's present. But like I said, it's very important that you don't do that until you are well into the lighting of that tank. When your lights come on and you come down to your gallery for the first time of the day, or you come down to your office or wherever you happen to keep your fish, you take about 2 hours after the lights come on to have those fish be out and about, because a lot of fish wake up quickly and others it takes them a long time to sort of get their day going. They're just like people. So if you think about people, how some people it's hard for them to get out of bed. They hit the alarm clock, 5 times before they get out of bed. And others just jump out of bed and they're ready to go for the day. Fish are the same way, and it has nothing to do necessarily with species. It has a little bit to do with that, but it has a lot to do with the fish themselves. Every fish has a little bit of a different personality and a way of getting their day going just like you do. So that is a trick that I'm going to leave you with today, and we're going to end this video on that note. So do me a favor. Look for this series over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to be covering a lot of things. The very first thing we're going to cover in the next video is water maintenance, fish health, and we're going to talk about a feeding schedule. And then we'll get into other things as we go, but those are the main things that we're going to cover in the next series, and that is, like I said, water changes, fish health, and a feeding schedule. So this is something that we can look forward to in that next series. We're going to cover that in depth. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on other things and drift off into other areas. If you have a question that you want answered about maintenance over the next couple of weeks, leave it down below here in the comments section, and I promise you I will answer you if the question is legitimate and I believe that it's a question that warrants me spending some time on answering it for you. I'm really good at getting back to people. Anyone here that spends time on this channel will tell you that I am very good at getting back to people about different things. So, having said that, please hit the like, the subscribe, comment, and share with your friends, because that's the most important thing on building this channel. The channel is doing really well. It's not a channel, like I said, that I want to make a living off from. I've never set out to do that. And as you can see, my views are not over the top or anything like that, like a lot of channels. It's simply because I don't advertise myself that way as a person who does this for a living. I do this as a hobby. My living is completely something separate, and most of you know what it is, but it's really important to me that you understand that the quality of the videos as I go along here and covering topics that are important to you guys is the most important thing to me. So stick with me over the next couple of weeks. We're going to have a lot of fun covering maintenance. And you say, fun? How can that possibly be fun? Well, that's all part of attitude, and it can be fun, and it can be simple. It can be something that doesn't suck the life out of you and take the joy out of keeping fish. After all, like I said, water is an art, and the beauty of these tanks that we put together is something that we should not allow ourselves to let go, and we're going to teach you how to do that over the next few weeks. Stick with me, and we'll talk to you again soon. Until then, we're out of here.